Hi parents, it's Sue Skinner, Senior High Principal. Welcome to our 20th annual Community of Concern Parent Meeting. This is a required meeting for 9th grade parents and new to BSM 10th, 11th, and 12th grade parents. So welcome. We're glad to have you here. We're here in the chapel. When we're at the podium with the microphone, we take off our masks, which is part of the rules that we have here. And then when we step away, we put our mask back on. So just so you know that when you see us without a mask, this is not how we normally are at school, but part of the mandate from the state allows us to take our masks off when we're presenting to a group. So here we are. I would like to welcome Mr. J to the podium, and he will lead us in prayer.
Thank you, Sue. As we begin, we remember that regardless of where we are in the holy presence of our God. And we begin in the name of the Father, and of the Son, and the Holy Spirit. And we pray, loving God, we live in a world that is difficult and challenging, a world whose values and beliefs are many times opposed to those that we try so hard to pass on to our children. As we gather here, we turn to you for the guidance and the direction that we need if we are to accomplish all that needs to be done. We are joined together in a common mission to guide, to protect, to nurture, and to love. In the midst of a confusing and troubling world, may we stand together as a people of understanding, commitment, forgiveness, and strength, serving you and all those in our care. And we ask all this in the name of your Son and our brother Jesus. And we close asking God's blessing in the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen.
Thank you, Mr. J. So here we are. This is a required parent meeting, again, for all 9th grade parents and then brand new 10th, 11th, and 12th grade parents. And I'll explain a little bit more about the required nature of this meeting in just a minute. Even though this is a virtual meeting, we will be taking attendance. So I'll explain more about that when I send you the email with all the links for the videos and a couple of handouts. But it is required attendance. And the purpose of this meeting is to share information, offer support, and affirm and strengthen the parent-school partnership as it relates to helping prevent harmful drug and alcohol behaviors and use among our children. So the bottom line is that this meeting is a joint effort to get on the same page. That getting on the same page is the key. And again, the goal is to help our students and to support our students. So the mandatory part of it is to make sure that we're all hearing the same message and that your child's friends' parents are hearing the same message, and that communication between the school and the parent partnership is solid, and we have this understanding that we agree to follow these guidelines that we're going to share with you tonight, or whenever you're watching this video. So again, that's the mandatory part of this, is that we're on the same page, and being on the same page helps our students. It is proven, it helps our students. So here's the thing. We know that during the high school years, some students begin experimenting with drugs and alcohol, some using occasionally, and others becoming frequent users. And we know this because we've asked our kids. We've asked students over the last 20 years here at BSM, our BSM students, we've asked them to talk about their use or to indicate their use on a survey. It's anonymous. It's published by Search Institute. And the survey is designed to do a number of things, two of which are, the survey tells us how many assets surround a student. And assets are things that protect a student, that help a student, that provide an environment that supports positive growth, healthy choices, and promotes well-being. So for example, if you have a trusted adult that you can go to who's not your parent, that's an asset. If you belong to a youth group at your church, that's an asset. If you read more than 3 hours a week for pleasure, that's an asset. Now there's like 40 different assets. But the idea is that we can measure how asset-rich our students are, and some of those assets are provided by the school and some by the family, and again, that partnership. So that's one part of what the data tells us. The other part is tells us what kind of risk-taking behaviors are our students engaging in. So here's what we found, and I'll tell you this, there's good news and bad news. The good news is we've seen an improvement in the use of our students over the years since we've implemented this partnership. But the bad news is kids are still using. So here's what we found from last year. This is last year BSM students. 16% of ninth graders reported attending one or more parties in the last year where alcohol was present, so where their peers were drinking. So it was 16% of ninth graders, and then that percent jumps to 32% for sophomores. Another piece of data, 15% of freshmen report using alcohol once or more in the last 30 days. And then in that same survey, this is again last year, 50% of seniors said that they used alcohol in the last 30 days. So 15 jumps up to 50%, 50, in the senior year. And then finally, 5% of our freshmen report using marijuana in the last year, and that statistic, that percent jumps to 30% of seniors who report using marijuana in the last 12 months. And I tell you these things not to shock you or scare you, but really to be realistic. We like to say around here that we are an ostrich-free zone. We're not going to stick our head in the sand and pretend like these things don't affect us. Just because we're a Catholic school, we are not immune. Our students are not immune. If your student hasn't been exposed to this yet, they will by the time they graduate. And again, this idea that we share the partnership, there's strength in that, and we can come together to surround our students with that protection. Also, and I'll send this to you in the email that I send, we have some external resources. They're handouts. There you go. And I'm just going to call your attention to page 16. It's from this Community of Concern booklet. And it offers some warning signs and symptoms of alcohol, tobacco, and other drug use. So here's the thing. Take a look at those symptoms. We're asking parents to watch for those symptoms. And I want you to know that we watch for those same things here. If we see something, we say something, and we want you to do the same thing. And then the next 3 pages offer suggestions for strengthening the relationship between you and your son and daughter, and then the relationship with other parents, and then the relationship with the school. So you see how those relationships form that fabric, that safety net, that tight bond as a community that holds us together. And that's one of the beautiful things about our community is that we can do this. As a Catholic school, we can say, we're going to rally around this kind of perspective, these values, these commitments to protecting our students. Also in the senior high, we have something in place called the Student Support Team. It's a team made up of the assistant principals, counselors, school psychologists, our chemical health coordinator, campus minister, special needs coordinator, and myself. So it's all of us around the table, and we meet on a weekly basis to discuss students who might need some extra assistance. So that is our way of offering that level of protection here at school, and you have access to that same set of professionals. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Weingartz, and he's going to talk more specifically about our policies here at BSM. Mr. Weingartz.
Thank you, Dr. Skinner. Like Dr. Skinner was saying, my name is Mr. Weingartz. I'm the assistant principal here at Benilde-St. Margaret's. Welcome and thank you for being with us today. If you're watching it in the morning or in the evening or whenever you're deciding to watch this video. We're all here today to be able to create a positive and supported learning environment for our children and our students. My goal for you today in hearing this talk is that the information is helpful and informative as we work together to help and support each other this school year and beyond and into the future. With the education of a child, we are in partnership with each other. The school, the family need to be working together as parents are first and foremost the primary educators of their children. With that education, we want to be able to inform and to key you in on some concerns that we have for your children today. The main areas I'd like to speak about today are about alcohol and drugs, and which your child can become exposed to, as Dr. Skinner has mentioned earlier. At BSM, we have policies that are in place, which we do not allow or want this to be used or abused by our students. One of the more important statements that I can make to you today is that if you think that your child is using, please call us. We can discuss treatment options. We can go over the availability of those different resources that we have at our school. There are many out there that would rather try and hide the problems, but we need to be open and honest with each other for the betterment of our students here and your children. Hiding the problem doesn't solve the problem. We have resources here at Benilde-St. Margaret's that we can help in educating and the student before it can lead to any disciplinary action that might come across. In regards to our policies, we do want to be able to create a positive learning community, an environment that promotes healthy and responsible behaviors from our student body. We recognize that alcohol and drugs are problems for students and can affect the positive learning environment. Students at Benilde-St. Margaret's are held to a standard in which they shall not possess, use, sell, or distribute, deliver, supply, or be under the influence of any illegal, controlled, or mood-altering substance on or off a campus. This also applies to hosting parties in which alcohol or drugs are supplied. If or when these incidents would occur, we do have consequences for these actions. But like I said before, we'd rather be proactive and address the problems that might be around before the consequence would have to be taken action with. We also have a lot of our students that participate in the Minnesota State High School League. And there is a difference between the Minnesota State High School League policies and our Benilde-St. Margaret's policies. At Benilde-St. Margaret's, we have a separation between our alcohol and drug policy and our tobacco policies. They're handled differently, and there's different consequences that go along with both. But in the eyes of the Minnesota State High School League, they don't separate those, and they see them as the same. The one thing about these offenses, or if they were to occur, the first offense is a suspension, and they also have to go through a chemical health assessment by our chemical health counselor here at Benilde-St. Margaret's. But with that, we want to be able to help and support. If it does happen where there are second or even third offenses, there could be up for expulsion at that point. But we want to keep in mind that we want to help and support first and foremost. And to be able to have those resources here is an important part of Benilde-St. Margaret's. Again, to reiterate, there is a difference between the Minnesota State High School League rules and our Benilde-St. Margaret's rules and policies around alcohol, tobacco, drugs at our school. One of the big things that we do see and we want to make reference to, and as our chemical health counselor later on in this presentation will talk about, is e-cigarettes and vaping devices. They are commonly used at the middle and high school level, and the rate of usage has been increasing over the last several years. We want to be able to talk about vaping. We want to be able to keep in mind that a person can vape tobacco, can vape marijuana. The smell is created by either of these, can be fruity. It can not even smell like a typical smell of marijuana in the past. And you might not even think twice about it. So that's what makes it even more difficult to detect. And as parents, even more difficult when you're at home. These devices can look a lot like a flash drive. They can look like a pen. They can look like really anything. And that's what makes it even more difficult as we go about trying to detect these as parents at home and at school. We do have Metro K-9 who comes in frequently within our school year with drug dogs, and they do searches. And these dogs are trained to be able to sense the THC and the different things that are involved with these vaping devices. Marijuana can also come in many different waxes, many different jellies, and other different forms. And it seems like it is constantly evolving throughout the years as we've been noticing these things. So it's something as parents to be aware of and to be watching out. And like I said, our chemical health counselor will be going through all those different things with you later on. In closing, I'd also like to thank you for being here. We've found that as students enter high school, much more freedom is given to students. And unfortunately, that's when introductions to chemicals start to happen. And in many cases, it corresponds with them obtaining a driver's license. We are here today because we really want you to be aware of what your student can be exposed to throughout their high school career. Whether it's here or at another school, outside of our walls, they're going to be exposed to different things. And we need to be in partnership with each other to be able to help and support each other. We want to be open to the fact that they may be faced with decisions to use or not to use sometimes. And we ask that you please partner with us. If you find out that your student uses, please don't hesitate to contact us. And we're here to help, to support your family, your student. I hope this information is helpful that you're hearing today, and I would encourage you to review it with your student as well. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you, Mr. Weingartz. So I'm going to introduce Jules Nolan. She is a psychologist. She partners with our school, and I like to think of her as the parenting guru. She's laughing at me now. But here's the thing. What she's going to talk about are best practices for parenting. And again, I want to go back to that mandatoriness of this meeting. What she says is what we buy into, right? So as a school, we buy into this, and we're asking our parents to buy into it. And that really is the beautiful part of our partnership. That's what makes our school unique and special, is that we can say these things. We can say, hey, everybody, this is what we believe. This is how we show up for our students, for our children. And so again, as you're listening to her, ask yourself the question, yep, can I buy into that? And we want the answer to be yes, quite frankly. I'll just lay it out there. So I will introduce and welcome to the podium, Dr. Jules Nolan.
Thanks, Sue, and hello, everyone. I have to make sure my hair is laying down. Thanks for listening to us today. I'm really happy to be here to talk about this. This is my favorite thing to do, is to talk to parents about how to parent around the tricky things that we see in high school. Know that I'm available to you at any time for any reason. I support the teachers, the counselors, the administrators here in solving problems in the school, and also I consult with parents about any issue, this issue with alcohol and drugs or any issue that you might be having. Know that I'm available to you at any time for any reason. So I'm going to talk for about 20 minutes. I like people to know how long they have to listen to me. I'm going to talk for about 20 minutes. I'm going to talk about brain development and how alcohol and drugs, and particularly marijuana, can interrupt that, and how being exposed to alcohol and drugs at a young age is predictive of later addiction. And so really what we're trying to do here is keep kids away totally from alcohol and drugs, because it predicts addiction in adulthood. So no, as Sue said, it is our kids. Good kids with good families who are athletes, who are smart, who perform academically very well, get involved in this. They can make a series of poor decisions, or one or two poor decisions, that put them in a situation in which they are at risk, in which they are at risk for medical complications, for getting in trouble at school, for legal complications. It's our kids. We know that it's our kids, and we don't hide our head in the sand about this. I'm going to talk about prevention. I'm going to talk about parenting techniques to help us navigate these times. So know that with regard to brain development, know that in adolescence, starting at about age 11, the brain functions in a whole new way. It is reorganizing itself. The limbic system, which is the emotional center of the brain, becomes online and in charge. So they do a lot of making their decisions in their limbic system, totally charged up by emotion. And that is why they take so many risks in adolescence. That is why we have kids who are impulsive. That is why we have kids who sort of are not so able to take other people's perspective anymore. Possibly they are less able to take perspective than they were in 4th and 5th grade, because the limbic system, the emotional center of the brain, is so online. That's what explains angsty teenagers. Know that they have more excitatory than inhibitory impulses, right? So they are more likely to act out than to sit and wait and think about something. I tell the story about a friend of mine whose kid got his driver's license. He didn't want to get his driver's license, and I see that a lot in current adolescents. They don't really feel like getting the driver's license. They're worried about it or whatever, but he was failing the test. He failed the test several times. So he wasn't going to do it. Finally, mom and dad talked him into getting the driver's license. Got it, passed the driving test, and came home running into the house, parked the car crossways across the driveway, running into the house, so excited, I passed. Well, he didn't know, and mom didn't know, that dad was down in the basement. Dad came upstairs. Oh, I told you, if you just persisted, this would work out. Nice job. You know what? You should take the nice car. You should take the Audi and go to the Dairy Queen. Here's the keys. You probably know what's coming, right? The child backs out of the driveway and T-bones mom's car with dad's car. More excitatory than inhibitory impulses. Our kids in adolescence get more dopamine, which is a reward chemical, in anticipation of a reward. So research has shown that even a tiny little reward, like a jelly bean, they get more expression of that happy brain chemical in anticipation of getting a jelly bean than they did when they were younger or than we do. So know that the excitement, the buildup of stuff can help kids or make kids make poor decisions. They're less able to take perspective. They're less able to take perspective of each other and of us. There was a study that was done at the University of Pennsylvania with one of those, you know, those shelving units that are IKEA shelving units that you can just see through. They look like cubes. Well, they put an adolescent on one side of the shelving unit and another person on the other, and then they put toys in each of the boxes. And they asked the adolescent what the person on the other side could see. So the adolescent had to take perspective of the other person as they closed different boxes from the perspective of the other person. The adolescents were less able to take the perspective of that other person and know what they could see, even than 7-year-olds. So they lose the ability to take perspective, and that is why we often have this, because they're not thinking about the parent who is at home worrying. And so they lose perspective of teachers, they lose perspective of parents, and even of each other. Kids are 6 times more likely to become addicted if they are exposed to alcohol and drugs prior to the age of 15. So we know that, you know, eventually someday they'll be old enough to drink, but we really want to push that off even through college, because the earlier they are exposed to this, the more likely that they will have an addiction problem later. The reward part of the brain is super sensitive in adolescence, and that is the reason that people think that this addiction occurs, because the reward part is so sensitive. They are more dramatic. They have more intense emotions now than ever before. But the good news is they're also more creative. They're more creative, and they are more sort of jazzed up by the things that influence them. And so it is a good time to channel the things that really get them jazzed up. Social justice things, their art, their sport, those things that really get them jazzed up, because they want that hit of dopamine. They want the happy brain chemicals that are associated with this time. And sometimes they're trying to avoid the negative emotions that are happening during this time. You know that your teenagers get lots of negative emotions during this time, and they can be very big. And one of the reasons that kids turn to drugs and alcohol is to avoid negative emotion. So when we channel that negative emotion, have your angsty teen write some bad poetry. When we channel that negative emotion, we help them express it and know that they don't have to run away from it. So as parents, we need to make sure that our kids are becoming skillful with negative emotion. And sometimes as parents, we accidentally save them from becoming skillful with negative emotion by keeping them from ever being disappointed or frustrated or lonely or angry. And good parents who have the best intentions can accidentally make this mistake. So if your kid is struggling at school, help them advocate for themselves. Sometimes in the past, I have seen parents who step in when a kid gets a bad grade on a test and say to the teacher, couldn't he take the test over again? He wasn't feeling good. And that's a good question to ask, but from the kid, not from the parent. When we oversave our kids from experiencing negative emotion, we teach them that they're not strong enough to experience negative emotion. And they really need to be good at this, because that's the world. What's coming for them isn't the happy childhood of no problems and no issues that we wish we could give them. It is the real world, full of disappointments and frustrations and anger, and we need to make sure that they are skilled with those emotions. You know, the rules around marijuana have changed in a way that's not so helpful for us. It's becoming legal in many, many states. And that sort of comes with this idea that marijuana doesn't hurt anybody, that it's okay. The truth is, it has the same impact as alcohol and other drugs do on a developing brain. It elicits that reward system of the brain and makes that reward system more needy of reward. It also affects their memory. It affects their judgment, and there's some evidence that it can affect long-term memory, judgment, and academic performance. Kids who are involved in marijuana, who smoke or imbibe marijuana and THC in other forms, are more likely to drop out of school. They do more poorly in school. So even though the laws are changing in unhelpful ways, we have to remember that does not mean marijuana is safe, and particularly not safe for our kids. Know that we need to decide together as parents. I'm going to talk about some parenting strategies now. We need to decide together as parents what the consequence will be for drugs and alcohol when we find out that our kid has engaged in this. We need to decide ahead of time. And we need to save the big consequences for this issue. So they need to know that in advance, that if they're involved in this, you find out they're involved in this, they're going to lose their license for a couple of months. It's going to be bad for them for a long time. It needs to be serious and strong. And in fact, if you can get your 7-year-old to decide what it is that a consequence should be, write it down, and then when they're 16, you say, this was your idea. Because typically 7-year-olds say, oh my gosh, people drink alcohol? That's ridiculous. They should never get to drive again. So know that kids need to know in advance what the consequence will be. And then remember that their brains are bad at assessing risk. Remember that they're smarter than we are at hiding things. Remember that if we in the past have modeled that if they get caught doing something wrong, that sometimes we punish them and sometimes we don't, they will extrapolate that into this instance too. So be careful, particularly now, how you parent around rule infractions. I'm not saying, you have to, every single rule infraction has to be a big consequence. It shouldn't. The big consequences should be saved for alcohol and drug use. But we need to be consistent with our parenting right now. Sometimes we accidentally model, I'm going to let this one go. And that gives them this idea that if they get caught, they won't get in trouble. They need to know that they will get in trouble and the consequences will be big. So be careful not to swoop in and save them from negative emotion. Be careful to let them experience those important emotions that they need to become skillful at. Frustration, anger, disappointment. I teach sometimes for the university, and at one point a sophomore came in. I was teaching adolescent psychology, and a sophomore came in with the paper that I had graded and threw it on my desk and said, I am not a C person. And I thought, wow, your parents were terrible. They didn't tell her, she didn't get the experience that sometimes you will try really hard and you will get an average grade. So we need to let our kids experience those things so that they are prepared for what life will bring to them. You need to know your kids' friends, and you need to know those kids' parents. We need to connect with each other as a community to protect our kids from this, because it is insidious, because it is everywhere. Know that the way you parent, starting with little kids and all the way up through adolescence, has an impact on how they will react when it comes to the pressures of drugs and alcohol. And by that I mean, if you blow up over little things, if you totally lose your cool and yell and scream because they didn't pick up their shoes or empty the dishwasher or feed the dog, they get this perception of you that you don't know what really goes on in the world and that you're not strong enough to take it. So if they end up at a party and others are drinking, they're worried to call you because they think, well, they blow up at the dog doesn't get fed and my mom blows up. She can't know that people drink at my age. So you want to be careful about how you parent and how you manage your own emotion at this time. Well, at all times, but at this time particularly, because you need to keep them emotionally close. You need to be their confidant if they find themselves in a difficult situation. So no, the other issue that I see with parents sometimes is that taking a vacation and going to a place where drinking is legal, maybe at 16 or 18, and allowing your child to drink during that time, or use marijuana in places where it's legal. What we do when we do that is we set this expectation that sometimes we follow the rules and sometimes we don't. And the expectation at BSM is no chemical use, period, the entire time that you are here. And so be careful about that. Be careful about setting the wrong expectation. So no unsupervised parties. Know the parents of your friends' kids, your kids' friends. No after parties at hotels. When the event is over, the event is over. Careful of the yelling and screaming. You don't want them to not be able to call you if they get into a tenuous situation. Sometimes they want you to say no. Adolescents particularly get nervous if parents aren't acting like parents. And sometimes they get invited to the maybe cool kid party and they're worried about going there because they know there might be alcohol and drugs. And they ask you because they want to be cool and tell their friends they asked you. And they really are relieved when you say, those kids are too old. I don't know those parents. You're not going. So they do want you to say no sometimes. When they come home from seeing friends, stay up, give them a hug and a kiss, sniff them, look at their pupils, be there, be present and be vigilant and let them know that you are watching. The kids whose parents are watching are safer, are more protected than the kids whose parents are not watching. And it is a really good excuse for kids to say, oh yeah, I'd love to, but my mom always stays up and she always has to hug and kiss me. She's sniffing me at that time. Know that they are looking, that they will use that as an excuse to not have to engage in this. Peer pressure is hard, and we need to give them as many excuses as we can to avoid alcohol and drugs. Also think about what you model. When you go to the cabin or when people come over for dinner, assuming we do that again someday, know that they watch you. And even adolescents who you think aren't watching, who you think are, rolling their eyes about you and your ridiculous things that you say and do, they're watching. And if the first thing that you say when people come in the door is, hey, what's everybody drinking? They watch that and they internalize that and they think, well, that's how to be a good host. And so they will model that in their private lives. Be careful with that. Now, I'm not saying that you have to hide your glass of wine with dinner. I am saying that be careful, especially for this time, about how you celebrate alcohol use. Also, driving after drinking. Even driving after one or two drinks is perceived by a child or by an adolescent as we don't follow the rules sometimes. We don't have to follow the rules sometimes. So for this time, while they are going through this time, be really vigilant with your own behavior and how you do this. Also, I think it's important to tell the truth about drugs and alcohol. People use drugs and alcohol because it makes them feel better. It helps them run away from their stress or their anxiety. But the problem is that it gets them into trouble. Even people who don't have an addiction problem get into trouble if they use drugs and alcohol to escape negative emotion, to manage their stress. So we've got to find other ways. We've got to do this in other ways. So understand, in closing, it is our kids. We at BSM are your partner in this. And if you are suspecting, if you know that your kid has a problem, contacting your counselor, our alcohol and drug counselor, or me will be helpful to you. They can avoid some of the repercussions if they got caught that would happen. Remember brain development. Remember they're so susceptible at this time to alcohol and drugs and to having an addiction problem later if they get introduced to it this young. Be consistent with them. Be clear, let them know what the consequences will be, and then be vigilant. This is a really tricky time, and we need to partner with each other, the school and us, and also parents. We need to partner together to protect our kids. Thanks for listening, and good luck.
Thank you, Jules. Thanks, parents, for hanging in there. There'll be more information that's included that you've already seen in the email that I'll send, and we'll sign off here from this video. Take care. Thanks so much. Bye now.